You ever been in a situation where you were like, wow, I don't think I have what it takes to do something? And sometimes you go through the situation and you're like, yep, I was completely right. I didn't have it. It was bad failure, like a train wreck, just like you saw slowly how things were falling apart. And there are times that you like wonder like, what am I doing here? And I was reminded about it this week actually. A few years ago, maybe like 4 years ago, Jessica registered the kids to go to a camp, a summer camp at Camp Lucan. And if you're a Methodist kid or have been to Camp Lucan, you know what I'm talking about. But it's a Methodist camp, and our kids were Gabby and Grace, and we're supposed to be there. And I signed in to be there to for support. Jessica thought it would be a good idea to do it like as a family event, and from the get-go I just felt like the spirit was telling me not to go. Honestly, I was like, it doesn't feel like peaceful, it's for me, like you as a pastor understand that the right job of any leader is to seat a person on the right seat of the bus, right? And so you're asking me to be seated in the seat that is not my seat because it's like children's ministry. And it's like I love my kids and I love other kids, but I love it especially when they go home at the end of the day, right? You don't love it when they stay with you and they're like, anyways. And so I'm like not prepared emotionally, and we arrive, we're there, uh, and I'm just like, I'm not ready. I think it was like honestly during that season that I was having some panic attacks, and it was just like worse because I was like, what if I have a panic attack and I am with kids in the room. And now, like, I am the adult and I become the weakest link. I hate being in that situation when I'm the weakest link. I never want to be there. And so we start the, the day, and, like, leaders are there. They explain to us what to do. They assign every kid to, like, the name of every kid in each, like, one of the rooms, I guess, or whatever you call it. Um, and and I happened to be the only person, the only volunteer that didn't have a staff person with them. But all the kids show up. And not only that, the kids that are like more problematic are assigned to me like providentially. And I'm just thinking, what did I just do? Like, what did I do to be here, right? And I'm just thinking, like, I don't even have a boy. Like, we have girls. Like, I don't need to be here. And so by the end of the night, it was just so horrible, the situation. I've gone through a lot. I mean, God has put me through a lot. I mean, this kids got to my nerves like so fast. There were two of them that, if you can just pray for their souls, it just was like, oh, so hard. And like, I remember, like, when you go to camp and like a parent or the person in charge of them drop them off and leave quickly, that's a bad sign. I mean, I couldn't see that person leaving. Like, it was so quick. They were so ready to let go. And I was like, oh my gosh. So this kid is not doing okay, and I'm not doing okay around him. And I had to call the dean of the camp, and I was like, hey, these kids are killing me. Like, I can't do it. You have to step in. He was like, oh yeah, I've got it. 10 minutes into it, he's like screaming at them, and like he's like lost it. And so it's like two adults versus like 10 or 12 of them, and it's just horrible. I somehow managed to survive that night, and I was just praying and talking to Jessica. I remember, like, she's coming with all the girls, and they're like singing and chanting and all happy, and like, yay, girls, right? And she's like, hey, how's it going? And I'm like, not good. Like, when I say that, it's like, it's really not going good. Uh, and for the entire camp, I was just like praying, God, help me here, because I need your help and I need your provision. Eventually, things began to turn around, and someone was assigned to be with me, and that person would leave for hours and then eventually show up. It was like Gandalf, like he's just like in the moment when you need him most, it's like he disappears. He's like, oh, I've got another thing to do, and come back. And it just was so bad. And I'm just like, we end the retreat, we end the camp, and we had some good experiences there. But then I left, and I just thought, what just happened? Like, what did I even do here? And so I didn't know anything, right? Fast forward, and this past weekend, Gabby and Grace had a They had a what do you call it? A drama, and a play. Sorry, not a drama, a play. And we went to them, and they're talking about like their friends and people who are participating, and it's a Christian school, so it's like they're going to be people who are believers, right? There with them, and they're talking about this kid Everett, and like Everett, like for months, they're talking about him, how fun he is, how great he is, and like the person that is shining, like first year doing any kind of drama, and he's put like on one of the main roles, and he's got a very kind heart, and like you're like, wow, that's pretty cool. Well, we finished the whole thing, and oh no, we were there, and it turns out that his mom, says, "Hey, did you go to Lucan? Were you one of those the deans?" And I was like, or counselors. I was like, "Yes, I was there." And she's like, "I'm Everett's mom." And I'm like, "What?" And she's like, "Yeah, I recognize you because I mean, she saw me like for 5 minutes, and I was like, 'You look very familiar, but I can't recognize you.'" So, anyways, it turns out that he was in the play, and he was in my camp, in my I'm sorry, my how do you call it, cabin? Sorry, in my cabin the whole time, and I just couldn't remember him. I mean, it was like 4 years before, and I'm like, "This is crazy." Um, so the play goes, and he's got a lot of lines, and everything just went well. The kids, everyone, it was a lot of fun. And so then I see by chance his brother, and I don't know him. And the brother looks at me and he says, "Hey, Everett has never spoken so much about any of the deans or like the counselors when he's gone to a retreat than you. Like he's mentioned you a ton." And I didn't even say hi to him. It was like that's his opening line. And I just thought, wow, whatever happened there, when I felt like I was running on empty, God was showing up His grace in full and made an impact in this kid's life. Eventually, Everett came, and like he went from the stage to me, and he like at the end of the play, and he was like, "Hey, do you remember me? It's Everett." And I had like he just begins to talk to me like we haven't seen, like I don't know, like we're kind of friends, you know. And I'm just so excited, and I just began to think, was the last time that I just thought maybe God didn't do anything, or maybe I was running on empty, but that prepared me for something greater, something that happened later. And I'm sharing this for a couple of reasons. The first one is this: whatever you're going through today, even if it looks like there's no provision, God will make a way. And not only that, you have to walk believing that that provision is not only for you, but for people around you. And so, what I wanted to do is we're going to go to John 2, and we're going to kind of scheme the passage, and we're going to cover a ton of words today, and letters and sentences. But what I wanted to do is just to give you kind of an eagle's eyes view of what is happening here in this story. And we've read these stories like individually. We're really accustomed to read the Bible like if it's like snippets, like episode 1, season 1, you know, and then episode 2 and episode 3. But really, it was meant to be read as a whole. Like you just read through the entire thing as a whole, like in one sitting. Like that's the way that it was meant to be done. And so we're going to kind of try to do a little bit of that with a section here. And I'm going to read with you and for you. So this is John 2. On the third day, a wedding took place at Canaan in Galilee, which is interesting. The third day, like that was unnecessary to say. Like it could have been said one day later, suddenly, right? Like Mark uses that word a lot. But interestingly enough, it says on the third day. It kind of gives you, the third day. Interesting. What happens on the third day? Well, there are certain things that happen in creation on the third day, but on the third day is when Jesus rose from the dead. And that's the greatest sign that we have of who Jesus is, his true identity. Well, this is a cue for there is something supernatural that is going to happen here, just like Jesus rose on the third day. But instead of celebration of Jesus being alive, it's a different celebration. It's a wedding, right? And it took place at Cana in Galilee, which is like, this is one of the 7 signs that Jesus is going to do. And of all the places that Jesus could have done the sign, probably it's the worst location. It's not in Jerusalem. It's out of town. It's like You imagine that you're going to do something amazing, broadcast something important, and you decide to go to, I don't know, Taylorsville, Kentucky. You're like, why there? Like, well, because that's the way that Jesus works. Like the place that you didn't expect, that's when he shows up. And then Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, they have no more wine. And it's like mom knows that Jesus is not just Jesus, he is Jesus. And so she's hinting at him, you have to do something. And he understands, like, she's expecting me to do something, right? And now he responds, woman, why do you involve me? And he knows why. Because she knows that Jesus can. That's basically why. Not only because she is mom, but because she knows that Jesus can. It's not just that she has a family role with Jesus, but it's like, I know you're able. Like, why wouldn't I involve you? And one of the things that I admire about this passage that sometimes I just brush through is Mary has a lot of faith in Jesus. Like, so much faith. One of the worst moments for me would be that my kid would underperform in something that he was supposed to be doing well. And I trained, and then he just flopped because he was being irresponsible, or, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want any of my kids to be embarrassed. I wouldn't want my kids to be in a bad situation. But Mary, she's like, Jesus will not flop. Jesus is going to do what he can because he is who he claims to be. Like, I know who Jesus is. She has so much faith that she looks at Jesus like saying, yeah, you can, Jesus, handle it. Like, take care of it. And it just makes me wonder, how many times have I approached Jesus with the faith of Mary? A faith that says, Jesus, there's no wine. This is important. Like, we cannot let down the party. Like, the party has to keep going. Wine is important for this. We're going to celebrate. And she involves him. And so he says, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not come yet. But what I love about Mary is that she doesn't say, oh, right. But she says, she doesn't address Jesus anymore. But his mother said to the servants, like, she's not like worried about what Jesus is going to do next or that Jesus pushed back. She just says, do whatever he tells you to do. And I picture her like walking away of the scene. Like, I'll let you handle this, Jesus, right? And just trust. Like, is this like, have a lot of faith and now I release. And honestly, a lot of times I have a lot of faith and I hang on with fear. And I pray, Jesus, there's no wine. And he's like, my time is not here. And I'm like, I know, but there's no wine. Like, please, are you going to do something? And Mary's like, no. Jesus, this is the problem. Servants, take care of whatever Jesus says. I'm releasing and letting Jesus do the work. A lot of times I honestly pray with the hesitation of, I need to pray and I need to keep worrying. Until it happens, I cannot have faith that it will happen. And Mary is doing completely the opposite. It's like, after this part, I can't remember reading any more about her. It's just, Mary disappears. It's like that was her role, to get Jesus in the scene, get him active, and get people involved with Jesus. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by Jewish for ceremonial washing. Now notice this, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. So nearby there's something used for religious purposes. So what was that? That before you ate, you need to be washed and cleansed, because if you did eat without washing your hands, you were impure, and then you would make people impure too. So it was breaking one of their regulations and laws. And so this was just part of not only being hygienic, but you had to clean yourself up for the sake of the community and for the sake of your religious acts. And so the interesting thing is, the jars are empty. Like, there is nothing in there. Religion is not showing up. There's nothing purpose. It's serving no purpose whatsoever. But they're there, and they're just empty. And later on, we see this religious leader that shows up to Jesus, and he's going to admit, Jesus, I am empty. I have nothing. Like I I don't have what it I don't know that I even have what it takes to get to God's kingdom. And that is Nicodemus. He will show up later in the story. And Jesus is about to do a miracle, but Nicodemus is like, I'm empty. And Jesus is going to open up to him some wisdom about what to do next. And so each one holding from 20 to 30 gallons, Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water so that they fill them to the brim. And I just love Jesus. Like, he's not intimidated by the size of the how many gallons it can hold. He's like, fill it up. We're going to celebrate big time. There is not going to be anything missing, and I will do whatever it takes to provide for this wedding. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. They did so, and the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. When he called the bridegroom aside and said, everyone brings out of the choice wine first, and then the cheaper wine after the guests had too much to drink. But you have saved the best till now. He's upset now. It's like you are doing everything opposite and upside down. Jesus not only does the miracle, he brings quality to the miracle. He brings the best of himself, and not only in quantity, but in quality, and he provides. And again, one of the things that, as we were worshiping, the thought kept coming to my mind, how much do we struggle with the sense of, I'm running on empty, God. I'm running on empty. And I don't know if you do that. It's happened to me. It's happening to me. And God kept reminding me, but I provide for you. I did a miracle. I can provide for you again. You need to keep asking me, fill me up, because one of the things that we constantly seem to be struggling is, I don't have what it takes. I'm exhausted and I'm tired. I need provision and I don't know it will come. And Jesus seems to be saying, I am your Father. I am the one that paid for your life. Your life belongs to me. And because of that, I will take care of you. And so there are a lot of things and reasons why I should be worried today. And Jesus seems to be saying, stop worrying about your life, because I purchased your life. I bought it out. Otherwise, you are telling the world that your life still belongs to you and I have not redeemed you. The word redeem means basically to buy out. You and I were in debt, whatever type of debt. And Jesus saw us broke, and he said, I will pay for you. You cannot buy yourself out of this situation. Actually, you've become enslaved in this situation. A redeemer basically buys someone out and says, now you belong to me. I buy you with your debt. I pay for it, and I take you out of that debt. You're debt free, and not only that, I claim you as my own. It's not just like, okay, here you have the ticket. You're free to go, and I'll pay for that. But he's saying, and I now am family with you, and I claim you as my own. And so when Jesus calls us, he's going to do the miracle of providing for us and go above and beyond whatever need we have. And so Jesus seems to be asking me today, why do you worry so much? If I am taking care of you, if I will provide for you, if I've done it before, and I can do it again for you. And then what Jesus did there in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and brothers and his disciples, and there they stayed for a few days. Okay, now notice this. This is the first sign, and the first sign that Jesus did, he could have done a lot of things. He could have multiplied bread. He could have healed people. He could have, but instead of that, Jesus shows up in a regular day. I mean, it's a special day, but still it's kind of not something that you would think, okay, he's going to heal someone. No, instead of that, he's saying, I will help maintain purpose and still show a redeeming idea of there's going to be a wedding one day, and I am going to be the one that provides for that wedding with his church, right? That place where he's going to celebrate with us with that wine. He says later on that he will never drink of the wine until he comes back with his glory. And so we are having communion We're celebrating with Jews, and He's waiting for that moment when He celebrates with us. Well, now you say, okay, that was a great miracle. The people there were amazed. Maybe there were only 6 of them or 7 that knew about the miracle in the entire wedding, right? The people, the servants. And that's it. And you think, well, that's nice. That's great. And so Jesus shows up, and what do we know? Jesus provides. He provides, and He's asking us to have faith. Well, the second story is Jesus comes to the temple, and he cleans up. Not only Jesus wants to provide for you and for me, He wants to clean up. He wants to do home cleaning. When it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, and that's a few days later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem in the temple courts. He found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and others sitting at tables exchanging money. So He made a whip out of cords and drove all of them from the temple courts, both sheep and cattle. He scattered the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. To those who sold doves, He said, "Get these out of here. Stop turning my Father's house into a market." His disciples remembered that it is written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then responded to Him, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority to do all of this?" Jesus answered to them, "Destroy this temple, and I will raise it again in 3 days." They replied, It has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to raise it in 3 days. But the temple He had spoken of was His body. After He was raised from the dead, His disciples recalled what He had said. Then they believed the scripture and the words of Jesus that Jesus had spoken. Now, while He was in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, many people saw the signs. Again, notice how many times it speaks here about signs. He was performing and believed in His name. But Jesus did not entrust Himself to them, for He knew all people. He did not need any testimony about mankind, for He knew what was in each person. And so Jesus shows up in the temple. And this is the place where people experience the presence of God. They go and find forgiveness of God, the forgiveness of God. They come and give thanks to God for what God has done, for His provision. This is where they go and fulfill their vows, right? This is the place where they go and pray. The only location in the entire world, it is one, and it was in Jerusalem, and it was the temple. There is no other location where there are sacrifices in the entire world, only here. And so you would expect that because people have one job, they would be doing it well. Well, people have taken over, and business is happening. And what we read from theologians and people who study the Bible in those times, they realized that it's not only the selling of doves, but they were selling in the area where the poor and the foreigners were supposed to be gathering. They were taking over that space. And Jesus is saying, you are taking over and you're excluding people from the act of worship. Now, what does that say to us today? Well, if Jesus is providing in the first miracle, in the second is, now God that has provided for you, but where are you excluding others from God's provision? Where are you excluding people who need to hear and see the signs and the mercy of God in your life? Is there a place in your life where God is giving you the opportunity to be light and salt, but we're excluding others from the walk of Jesus because it's just a place of comfort, because our religion is taking over instead of having a heart for them? And so in the first story, Jesus is going to provide. In the second, Jesus is going to remove. In the first story, Jesus is all about, I will do the miracle, and the second, He gets physical. And so what it begins to make us, we should begin to think is there a way that my faith is becoming a stumbling block to others? Not because it's a Christ-like faith, but it's because it's an unhealthy faith. A faith that says, I will do it through the flesh, and that is holding other people from coming close to Jesus. And one of the things that I was thinking about is how my faith can reflect really values of the world or really values of Christ. And we're going to talk about it later, but really everyone is a disciple maker. Every person you know is a disciple maker. Even non-believers are disciple makers. They're multiplying themselves in others. Any celebrity, any influencer, any person that you know, any mom, any dad, they're multiplying themselves in others. And the way that we represent ourselves is going to say who we serve. And so the question is not, are you making disciples? You are, in fact, making disciples. But the question is, what kind of disciples are you making? If people went and showed up for the first time to the temple and they had never been there before and they had left and all they knew was, okay, I went to the temple and there were all kinds of animals and I was supposed to buy an animal at the temple. And they walked out, they would have thought, this is the way that worship in the temple is. There are supposed to be animals every time, and it's really hard to worship because there's all kinds of noise and all kinds of whatever, and it's just not worshipful. Maybe that's just worship in the way it is. And so instead of having a true act of worship, it just becomes a stumbling block for someone else's. And so this is a moment where we need to ask ourselves then, is my faith, the way that I interact with God, the way that I express my devotion to God, something that encourages others to grow and mature in faith, or does this holding them back from really wanting to know who Jesus is? In other words, if Jesus showed up in the temple of my heart today, would he begin to vanquish parts of my heart that he would say, this is opposing my will. This is not from me. This is from you, and it needs to be gone. And then it says here, now, while he was in Jerusalem at the Passover, many people saw the signs he was performing and believed in his name. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He did not need any testimony of mankind, for he knew what was in each person. And I just love the way that it's translated here. It says this little word, now. There was a Pharisee. And that word is very purposeful. Now there is someone here. And I'm not going to read the entire chapter, but there was a Pharisee, a man named Nicodemus, who was a member of the Jewish ruling council. He came to Jesus at night and said, Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher who has come from God. For no one could perform the signs you are doing if God were not with him. Now, notice this, how we have gone through the story, right? Jesus goes to a wedding and seems to be a little bit purposeless. Like it's just like, it's okay, he does a miracle, but how is that going to impact? That miracle is being talked about now. People are talking about it, and Jesus didn't have to broadcast it. Just the faith of the people that witnessed, they began to share about it. In that miracle, that provision, that moment when people were beginning to wonder, what are we going to do now? And Mary had the faith and the audacity to tell Jesus, you do something about it. And having that faith in that provision is going to prepare the heart of people. But look how, I just want you to picture, maybe that miracle was something that was told about and it got to Nicodemus' ears. And then he began to pay attention and say, whoa, who is this Jesus? Then Jesus goes to Jerusalem and begins to make more miracles and signs and clean the temple. There's a transformation in the temple. What was done before is not done anymore. And the rituals that were holding people back are not there anymore. And there is clean space, open space for people to worship really. And it gets Nicodemus' attention and heart to the point that he has to open up and disclose and say, Jesus, you may think that we're not paying attention to you and that we don't believe in you, but there are a number of us that believe. I want to know you. And this is making me think, what if the place of provision for you can have a ripple effect in the lives of others? What if your faith, like Mary, can open up spaces not only for Jesus to provide for you and for others, but for people to hear about the kind of life that you have, the kind of miracles that God is doing through your life, so that they will eventually come and believe and say, hey, Tom, you're not regular guy. Like, we're not a regular guy. What's up with you? And when they show up, we don't make it weird, right? And we don't say, well, I'm a good guy, everything is good, life is whatever. But instead of that, what I love about Jesus is Jesus goes straight forward and he's just going to tell him. So Nicodemus is saying, for no one could perform the signs you are doing if God were not with him. And notice how Jesus replies to him. Jesus replies, very truly, I tell you, no one can see the kingdom of God unless they are born again. He addresses the main issue. And so this is what now you may be wondering, okay, what are you trying to say? I'm trying to say this. Maybe for some of us that are struggling with some sort of spiritual tension or personal tension today, that can be maybe the soil that God is going to use not only to provide for you, but that others may come to faith in Christ. What if we begin to see these temporary struggles as an opportunity for the gospel to be heard and known of? What if I can change my attitude and say, well, God, maybe you will provide through this. Maybe you will open up, and maybe you're the one that is going to give what is missing, not only for my personal benefit, but so that others will come to see Jesus, that God, you're alive, that they can trust you and come to you. These acts, these signs began to soften the heart of this Pharisee. And the Pharisees, we know that they're a group that were opposing Jesus, and one of the reasons is because they heard Jesus saying, I will destroy this temple. That would have hardened the hearts of a lot of Pharisees, but for one Pharisee, he had to go to Jesus, to the master, and say, what is happening here, Jesus? You are no common guy. And we believe that you come from God. This is a big compliment. This is big. When was the last time that someone told you, I believe that God sent you to my life? And so my hope is that you will realize God is sending you to someone else's life. So we're going to pray, and I'm just going to ask you